All right, we are recording for chapter 5, which this one might also be short. We'll see. I don't have that many notes, and I'm not feeling that good about the story. I mean, which chapter was it? One of them. I wasn't having that great time with, but I know I didn't say, but I did think it. That I mean, it's like Voyage Home does have weaknesses to it, the film. Excuse me, but it is still fun, and that I think makes up for a lot. It is just a kind of fun story. But so I'm just like, yeah, see, maybe not so good an episode, chapter here, not so good chapter there. But it's like, keep going and hopefully we run into that fun. This one not so fun. We're not there yet. I'm just trying to remember which one it was. Oh, no, I think it was actually the last one because of how just the stuff with the Traveler seemed to be going back and forth as to what it actually does and is meant to do. Maybe it was the one before, I don't remember, but let's just focus on this. Which some of what I have is just straight technical issues, which it does worry me because like there's several things in here that I'll put it this way. It's not. I'm not even sure I want to agree that this is the way to put it. It's impersonating science fiction. In that it's like, why are you saying this is how it would work? Or why are you not saying that this is how it would work, but you're doing everything else? This doesn't make sense for how this would work. So they're aimed at the sun because slingshot maneuver thing. The light grew so intense that the screen blacked it out, creating an artificial eclipse. Why would you do that? It's like the view screen is artificial, and like just like a phone screen would be. Like you take a picture, or just even you have the camera up, or because webcam there, and I've got your thing there. It's artificial and background removal, right? The view screens in Star Trek are all the same. They are just screens. Why would it black it out instead of just dim it so it's within a dynamic range and brightness that doesn't hurt your eyes? That seems far more reasonable. But nope, it's just completely blacking out, which it's like, it's a really dumb design because it's also, it's like, what if there's information at the star you need to see? Like, an enemy ship is there. You lose view of it now. This is stupid. And this is what I mean by it's like, this is a technical thing. It doesn't make sense. It should just be it adjusts the levels of it down. In fact, hang on just a second. Just remembered I have this. My fancy Nikon. Just, technically it's a mirrorless, not a DSLR, but solar filter. And so it's like, I have the technology right here to make it so I can stare at the sun. Sorry, just trying to get that there. Because, the eclipse a year ago? Yeah, it's been about a year now. Well, a little bit more than a year. But yeah, I mean, it's like I got it for that reason. And I can aim the camera. Put that on the lens and aim that at the sun and be able to see without, and it won't damage the lens. Won't damage, well, not so much the lens, but it won't damage the sensor. It's like, and you're saying that this thing that you can't do that with the view screen? Okay. And I'm sorry, they would have had solar lenses back then. Solar filters like that. So yeah, although, separately, I do think it's an interesting thing to consider with Star Trek. That technically, all those images are fake, right? That are on the view screen. It's not like they would have a visible light camera set up or multiple of them and do that. No, they just have sensors that likely are accepting a wide range of frequencies, and then it's reconstructing the image from those sensors. So, and you can focus it down to a specific band of wavelengths in visible light, or it could go to something else. Technically, it's also all false color in this sense, but it's like that actually is somewhat interesting because, in theory, you could have a bunch of sensor nodes in the receivers all around the ship, and then have it all feed into an AI system like we have today to figure out, okay, we've got, a sensor pointing that way, sensor pointing that way, but we want an image for what's in between. Okay, well, the interpolation, maybe you could have that done by an AI system, because it might be better able to handle some of that. Or you do all that and have it build up the like 3D modeling in there as well. I'm saying you could do some neat stuff that technically some of that you would not need AI for. It would depend. I'm not sure how, because there's some things where it's not that AI, where it's like we already have solutions to it, but it's like to actually run the math out precisely can be slower than using the AI stuff that is it's technically an approximation, but it will just run it faster because it is an approximation. So it's like you could do stuff like that potentially, and it's like that's completely reasonable, but it's also some of the technology they already would have had back then. I mean, yeah. So yeah, I don't like. It really does feel like the science fiction is not being thought out and not being presented well either, but we'll get to that. This is a scale issue here. The Bounty shuddered with the drag and twist of warp drive. They're already at warp 2. Within the magnetic field and the gravity of the sun. So the reason I have a problem with that is the point at which you'd really be feeling the magnetic field and the gravity of the sun, you're probably close enough to it that you're gonna just at warp you're already past it. That's also an issue in the movie where it's like warp 9.2 and it's like, okay, this what warp 9 is supposed to be, you'd be outside the solar system in the time it takes you to say that. Like the actual speeds involved make no sense for it. Yeah. It is a definite problem of scale there. That's like, no, the solar system isn't that big. It isn't quite that big for it. Crap, there was another. Oh yeah, just as far as the whole gravity is the weakest of the forces, of the fundamental forces, but I mean just the whole for anyone being like, well, I mean, like Jupiter is really far out there, and Pluto is really far out there, and the Kuiper Belt, all that's really far, or the Oort cloud, those are really far out there. They're feeling the gravity of the sun. Yeah, they're in orbit. If you are in orbit, well, if you were to just be, say, positioned near the moon, but not orbiting, like you were stopped, you wouldn't be really cognizant of Earth's gravity. I mean, yes, you would be attracted to the Earth and would start falling towards it, but you wouldn't really feel it because it's kind of weak. It's just how the orbits and such work there, with things are balancing out there, and it's just, yeah, it's yeah. That does suggest you are close, relatively close to the sun, and then warp becomes a major problem. So it's a problem of scale, but it is also. I mean, technically, there's also the question that I have of should gravity even impact warp? And I'm dead serious. Excuse me. Should gravity impact warp, or should warp have some sort of intrinsic immunity to it? Because otherwise, like there's a lot of things that can produce gravity, and just what implications can there be? Technological implications can there be? So, for example, in Star Wars, at least as I recall, for part of Star Wars Rebellion, but also some guides, which so technically it's all non-canon stuff. There's the Interdictor Star Destroyer that specifically has a gravity well generator to prevent people from entering hyperspace, entering light speed in Star Wars. But also the Imperial Star Destroyer Class 2 is supposed to also have those built in. So it's like it has a major implication there, which Disney then ignores in the movies, in their movies. But I don't know what it is in Star Trek necessarily, if it should be disruptive there. But yeah, anyhow. We get, as Kirk is going back is on there and they're going back in time. He's getting a whole bunch of memories flashing, which is a little weird just because it's like describing one thing, then tracing back, describing one thing, tracing. And it's just odd because it's like describing something, like talking about his childhood and then it's talking about his friend Gary Mitchell, who they knew each other in the academy. So it's actually like, I'm thinking about my brother, and then he's like, that goes back to when I'm a baby, essentially. And then it's like, I'm thinking of Gary Mitchell, which is starting when I'm 20, and then it's going back against. But one thing that this does help with is he saw Sam as a youth, laughing, challenging him to a race across the fields of the Iowa farm. So later, when he's mentioned, no, I only work in space, I'm from Iowa. What, rather, no, I'm from Iowa, I only work in space. So we are actually getting it set up right here. And I looked it up. Apparently, there's a book, The Making of Star Trek, that does state that Kirk is from Iowa. I think it said it was 1955. I don't remember what the copyright is for this, and I haven't tried looking it up. Hang on. It'll take me a moment because phone's on the wrong Wi-Fi at the moment to just see what it is for the movie, since that should be what it is for this as well. Plus, there's something else I need to do. There. Alright. '86. Okay. So then, no, that book would predate this. It would then just be a question of, could the information have been determined, because Search for Spock was 84, so this came out in 85. Could that information have been set, he's from Iowa, be set in preparation for Voyage Home? Not sure. Anyway, another small thing that, to be fair, I'm just going by instinct because I don't remember the math for this. It's been 17 years? The temperature began to fall as the ship radiated energy back into space. Because basically the ship heated up because it was so near the sun. It's like, and their heat shielding and such, they would just explode so long that it heated up. It's like, yeah. Radiating heat is actually pretty slow. So the idea that they're inside and is heated up inside and like Kirk is sweating from this, it's going to take a long time for that to be evacuated. Well, not be evacuated, but to be radiated out. Evacuating out would be much faster. So that would be, and actually I could believe that you would have that on a starship or a spaceship. That actually makes some sense. That you could have something that would, like an air conditioner, move the heat from the internal atmosphere to something else, some other medium, and then you would just dump that into outer space. That actually would make sense. It would be kind of like how something that sometimes people forget about is the casing for a bullet actually is part of the cooling mechanism for the gun. So when that is ejected, it holds a lot of heat on there. So if you were to fire a gun without the casing there somehow, it would actually overheat much faster because it isn't having that mass carrying the heat away. But there's also, I'm putting in my notes, it's like, ships would have to be insulated, so it would take a long time to heat up. It would also take a long time to cool off internally. So, yeah. And when it's like the thermal power of the sun versus just you're radiating heat, yeah, it's going to take a while. And let me just, yeah, talks about it being cloaked here, and then we got, and this I actually do want to add one other thing on. The leading edge of its wings glowed with heat as they're coming in through the atmosphere. Ionized molecules of gas rippled from the heat shields over the bow. The Bounty passed into night. The ship rode a fiery wave toward Earth, a brilliant shooting star in the dawn sky. And it does refer before this. The ship bit into the air, slowing as it used friction and drag to help its braking, and then the leading edge of the wings glowed. So it's like, yeah, we're going to cloak, but we're also going to then do this thing that makes us very, very obvious we're here. And that would also potentially be picked up on radar. I'm pretty sure that sufficiently powerful heat disturbances do actually get picked up on radar. So it doesn't matter that they're cloaked. That would be picked up. And visually, they would obviously be seeing infrared. They'd be seeing, yeah, I mean, it's like, why did you even bother cloaking? or rather, it would make a hell of a lot more sense that no, the bird of prey actually can control its speed well enough to not undergo this. Another thing I want to mention, and this was actually when I last watched through Stargate SG-1 and was reading trivia along with it, because there's a couple episodes that concerns a ship entering Earth's atmosphere. And one thing mentioned in trivia that I saw that, it's like, yeah, that actually makes sense. And then scenes months of, yeah, it's actually not, the primary source of heat in that is actually not friction. It's pressure. So because you have the ship coming down at such a high speed, the air underneath it can't get out of the way. So it's actually compressing it, and that's what's building up all the heat that is then causing the glow. Crap, there's a name for it. I'm blanking on what it is. But it is also, because I've seen some videos, like Slow-Mo Guys did some, Smarter Every Day did some, and I think one or two other places, can't remember the name of it, but where they fire a bullet and they would see when the bullet is about to approach a wall, you know, whatever a solid object is, you'd see a flash. And my guess is it's actually that, because as the bullet is moving, it's able to push the air out in all directions, so it's not heating up yet, but it's also able to push out forward. But once it is approaching the wall, once it gets there, nope, the air is going to maximize the pressure, and that could be enough to cause the energy to build up as well, and so it starts glowing, just provides that flash of light. So that is my guess for what's happening there. That's what the effect is. But it's also just a little bit of fun fact for if you ever try writing science fiction, that it's actually air pressure. There is also friction, but it is also the pressure. Or maybe, you know, look it up yourself to make sure, because I could be misremembering it. But look, it may be worth looking that up, because it does suggest other things. It also helps explain why, like in Apollo 13, it'll talk about how too shallow an angle and they will skip off the atmosphere. It's because there's so much pressure there that if the angle isn't right, the pressure is so great, despite being air, that you will just bounce off, that the pressure against pushing up is great enough to completely change your course. So it is actually very interesting. And once you realize it's like, oh yeah, now all those other comments make sense that don't get explained, like in Apollo 13. So they pick up the whale songs coming from San Francisco, which confuses people. That doesn't make sense. Unless they're stranded in the bay, Sulu said, or held captive? It's the only one I can pick up, Uhura said. And it's being broadcast, but there's no way to tell if it's live or from a recording. Is it possible, Jim said? Is it possible that they're already extinct at this time? They are not yet extinct, Spock said. Why can't Uhura find more than one? Jim snapped. Because, Spock said evenly, this is the wrong time of year for humpbacks to sing. How does Spock know this? There's been nothing stating that they know the time of year. I mean, technically... Yeah, no, that's still fine. Technically, by knowing where the Earth is... Actually, wait, no. Well... I'm trying to remember. No. He would be able to. He should be able to tell what it is by looking at the stars. But there was nothing stating that they did anything besides just, oh, that's Earth, to figure out their position. But it's technically, yes, they would be able to calculate the time of year by doing that, but there's no mention of it at all. It's just, oh yeah, it's not the right time of year for that. How do we know what time of year it is, Spock? I mean, it's like you said we were just aiming for this time period, not the specific date, because you don't have enough information for that. The computer starts. Now you're telling us you know exactly the day. Yes. It's like you're just making this shit up, aren't you, Spock? No, I'm not. I'm a Vulcan. I wouldn't do that. You're half Vulcan, so I'm only half doing it. I mean, it's and it's also the whole, how does he know they're not yet extinct? I mean, it's like he's just making these statements, but there's nothing backing it up. And also the whole, or held captive, it's like, zoos are a thing. Even at that point in time, zoos are a thing, Sulu. And it's not held captive, right? They are in captivity, but it's not like they're in prison or anything like that. And no, they're not. I mean, it is, in my opinion, it is fools and idiots that think zoos are bad things, because the reality is that's how we learn so much about them. So it's like about these various animals and how we can then do things to try to save those that are in the wild, because it's like learn how their bodies work in some cases, and now we can go and see things and go and help them in nature. And it's also, for the majority of species, I can also believe that actually now I'm really curious. I am now really curious. What is the percentage? Like, I can believe that for plenty of species, not even like 1% of the population is in zoos. But that 1% will provide like 99% of our understanding of the species. And it will also be a way to expose people to these things and have them then find their own interest and be like, oh wow, this is really cool. I want to learn more about this species. Or I want to learn more about that species. I want to be a vet. I want to be in conservation. It's like all these different things. And it's, the benefits very much outweigh the supposed harm there. And it's also, these animals are now getting regularly fed. So yeah, you also get that advantage as well. So it's like, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to me, the people that attack it, because I mean, just as I said, the benefits are readily there and quite significant. So I think it is more just people being like, oh, well, I wouldn't want to be held in a cage. It's like, yeah, but what's your point? You're not an ant. Well, we are animals, but that our nature is different than theirs. That doesn't sound the best way to put it. But it's still, it's like that's it's not quite how it works. And plus, it would be, I guess, a way to put it that would be different for humans, because we have the ability to say no, we want to leave. Is zoos could be in some ways like hospitals, in that hospitals, people going there for when they're sick. That's also, you are in captivity. You're not, well, technically you are allowed to leave, but we'll just say you're not allowed to leave. You are allowed to leave without, contrary to doctor's advice. But people are there learning, especially if it is a hospital that is connected to a school of some kind. It's like you are there for people to be educated on how your body functions. That also happens with the zoo. Zoos also, however, because they have the animals there that you cannot see otherwise, is a way for people to see these animals and learn about them and have an interest in them. And there are certainly plenty of people out there that, because they see a gorilla actually there, not because they see a picture of it, but it's actually there, and they get to some degree interact with it, are like, this is awesome. Let me read all about this. Let me do stuff with this. And that's what I want my life to be. And yes, you do get to interact with them, kind of. There was a gorilla at the Milwaukee Zoo. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering the story correctly. Named Samson, that my uncle, when a kid, would, be there, and it's like, a lot of kids would do things like, making faces and such. And Samson would just kind of sit there with his back against the wall, and what he would do occasionally, and he knew, it's one of those things, they know they're on display and they're having fun with the people watching. Samson would just occasionally just go like that and smash the glass with the side of his arm, and the whole enclosure would shake. He was so powerful. But he would just do that because it was fun. It provoked reactions from all the kids and adults too. And it was interesting because when he died, they did do an autopsy, and they actually found he had endured multiple heart attacks throughout his life. He had minor heart attacks throughout his life. So yeah. But it is also one other thing with that. Just as, again, you got stupid people. The whole Harambe thing. Samson could go like that, and the whole building would shake. That's why in that Harambe situation, where, if I remember correctly, it was, and I don't care enough about the meme to it, I'm sorry, but it's like a child fell in there and Harambe was kind of sort of trying to protect it. the problem is, even if that's the case, that Harambe was trying to protect it, you cannot trust that an animal as powerful as a gorilla could not accidentally seriously harm or even kill the child. Such that, no, the only response is you have to kill it, and you can't tranquilize it. Tranquilizers don't have instant impact, don't instantly work. You can't necessarily even approach the animal, because it might then scoop up the thing and be like, no, I'm protecting it, I'm not going to let you mute, and then crush it. So no, it's that legitimately is the only choice you can make, unless you're going to actually argue that the gorilla has more right to live than the child. Because the child is, the gorilla is in no danger. The child is. So it is, yeah. No, it's sad, it sucks, but that is the reality. That you would need to destroy the gorilla there. But there are people who think, no, we shouldn't. No, it's unfortunate, but that is sometimes what you have to do. Okay, so we got this, and I'm just trying to remember how much. Okay. I need to check the highlights. Okay. So I need to combine some stuff here for where, yeah, the science fiction is not that. It is really falling apart here. Scotty, can't you recrystallize the dilithium? Nay, Scotty said. I mean, aye, Admiral. 'Tis theoretically possible, but even in our time, we wouldn't do it. 'Tis far easier, never mind cheaper, to go and mine new dilithium. The recrystallization equipment would be too dangerous to leave lying about. Okay, like that's just all the statement we get there. But then we follow. There is a 20th century possibility, Spock said. Explain if memory serves, human beings carried a dubious flirtation with nuclear fission reactors, blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, yeah, just talking about this other stuff, and then, assuming that's true, how do we get around the toxic side effects? I mean, there was actually no explanation for why he's talking about nuclear fission. That's the problem. Because, I mean, Scotty doesn't say anything about it. It's just, the crystals are stopping, the structure's falling apart. How do we, can we fix this? In theory, it's possible, but we don't have that stuff just lying around, even in our own time. Not that it's not possible. Just state we don't have this stuff lying around. And then Spock's like, your people actually used nuclear fission at the time, at least until, they got to nuclear fusion, which is so much better. Assuming that's true, how do we get around the toxic side effects? Because he had mentioned those. We could build a device to collect the high-energy photons safely, then inject the photons into the dilithium chamber, causing crystalline restructure. Theoretically, it's like, you hadn't said that the high-energy photons are needed. It's just, oh yeah, we can just get them. Why? Okay, why? Why would we want the high-energy photons? Well, they're the solution. So why didn't you start with that? And then it's also later, because they're having to divide into teams and assign it to people. Commanders Chekhov and Uhura, you draw the uranium problem. But no one's uranium mentioned. Hang on. There was a mention of plutonium. Yeah. This, in spite of toxic side effects, the release of noxious elements such as plutonium, and the creation of dangerous waste that still exists on Earth. I mean, it's like, now we're just bringing this. I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm just throwing this stuff out here. It's like, what is the thread that actually makes this make any sense? It seems more like it's just being vomited out at me, and I'm just supposed to understand what it is. And it's like, no, this is technical made up stuff. I'm sorry, Vonda. You need to actually explain it. Okay, just to say that, like, going back to what Scotty was saying, it's like, it's theoretically possible we would need to inject it with high energy photons, but we don't keep that equipment around even in our time, so nothing can do. And then you have Spock say, well, you would do work with nuclear fission, and that produces it. It does have these, yeah, but it's also releasing radiation. That's a problem. And it's like, well, can we get around that? Yes, we can capture. We can have something that captures just the high energy photons. which is also funny because those are also kind of one of the more dangerous of the toxic side effects. Boy. I'm just thinking, do I want to? I have a headache, so I don't know how much I want to rant on this. So, there would be three main types of radiation: alpha, beta, and gamma. Alpha and beta are both particles. Alpha is the nucleus of a helium atom, so 2 protons, 2 neutrons. Beta is actually an electron, and gamma is gamma rays, so that's the high energy photons. There's also neutrons, which it would depend. I mean, that neutrons are actually scary because they can actually. I'm trying to remember exactly how it works. They can, because of the lack of a charge, actually have it go a decent distance. And they are fairly massive particles, not as massive as alpha particles, but they can carry a lot of heat, a lot of energy, and be very destructive when they hit things. But it's also, neutrons are specifically what you want in nuclear fission. So you would put the greatest effort into shielding for that, so that you make sure it all stays in one spot. That's part of the reason why, it's advantageous to use heavy water reactors versus light water. Light water, which is just regular H2O, will actually absorb neutrons. So as the light water boils off, it will then the capacity to absorb the neutrons diminishes, which means then that the neutrons can keep bouncing around and actually trigger more nuclear fission. This is what happened with Chernobyl, because the light water boiled off, and that, along with other things, I believe, but certainly that enabled it to overheat and also produce more power. With a heavy water reactor, it uses deuterium, so it's actually D2O instead of H2O. So now the hydrogen atoms in there are a proton and a neutron. These do not absorb neutrons. Heavy water does not absorb neutrons, which is actually helpful, because it means that the neutrons, instead of being able to emit from the uranium, hit the water and potentially be absorbed, instead it'll actually hit and bounce off because there's no place for them. So just dink dink. And it's actually a medium that helps, it supports the neutrons bouncing around to hit the uranium fuel that will absorb it and undergo nuclear fission. So the advantage there is you need far fewer neutrons to get a stable reaction going. And so if the heavy water boils off, because the medium is then lessened, it's just air now, so it's absorbing the neutrons, it actually cools the reactor down. So it naturally then, it's a natural safety protocol there. Now, there are also other more advanced designs of nuclear reactors that are even safer than that, but it still is just... Yeah, it's... The suggestion here, it's like... They're just pulling things out, like, we need this, and it's like, no, that's not how it works. And it's not like you can't make it how it works. This is one of those things where, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. And I said I got a headache, so I'm having to pause. It's awkward because basically once you start, and this is something that, if you haven't seen me do this in other videos, you need to look at more of them. Where basically once you start down a path with me, you then have to actually follow it through. You can go all the way to the completion there, because it pisses me off if you don't, and I will call you out on some of this. Like, there was a game review I did years ago where, and I know I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again, where in the game, it was just basic save the princess story. That's it. But then there was at one point where a character says, don't trust literally the character that tells you you need to save the princess. Don't trust him. It's like, oh, okay, I'm now intrigued by this. What's going to happen? But there's never a payoff from that. There's never, in fact, another line from a character told to you. So it's like, you suggested that there's more here. Because of you doing that, you have now made me expect it, and then you failed to deliver it. I'm going to attack that story. All right, it is a bad story for that. If that one line was in there, I'd be like, yeah, the story's fine. I mean, it serves its purpose, and that's it. That's fine. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on here, especially with the whole. If memory serves, human beings carried on a dubious flirtation with nuclear fission reactors, both for energy production and for the creation of weapons of war. This is in spite of toxic side effects, the release of noxious elements such as plutonium, blah, blah, blah. Once you start talking about that, mainly the whole, this is in spite of toxic side effects, what do you do about toxic side effects, high energy photons. Once you get into that, it's like, okay, you are now opening it up for me to criticize because you're starting to touch on topics that then you're not exploring, and you're also getting some of it wrong. I get to criticize you for that, okay? But if it was just that had dubious flirtation with nuclear fission reactors, both for energy production and for the creation of weapons of war. This is before you figured out nuclear fusion and had those reactors replace it. But at this time, fission, if we can find a fission reactor, it can produce the high energy photons we need. If you just did that, that's fine. You're not bringing up anything else. You're not having there be any other issues that have to be addressed. It's just that. That's fine. But no, you touch on these other things that you're not explaining. You're not paying off. So yeah, I got an issue with that. Also have an issue with this. They're looking out at San Francisco. And this is Kirk. His point of view, unfamiliar tentacles of light reach across the water. Bridges. In his time, the Golden Gate Bridge remained as a historical landmark, but the other bridges no longer existed. Why would you get rid of bridges? They're literally to allow you to get from point A to point B faster. Does no one walk? Do you only ever take flying aircraft? They're all flying, but I was going to say like flying shuttles around or transporters? You lazy bums? You're just doing that. It's, what the hell? This is dumb. I was like, we still have footbridges today. They're going to still be there in a few hundred years as well. And still be used, I mean, because they might not be the same ones, but you'll still see footbridges because people will walk. People will bike. Even if you want to say that cars will disappear, which they won't, it still is you're going to have these because people want to get from point A to point B. What nonsense is this? But then also, to be fair, I think it was in the motion picture, though, that novelization was saying that humanity basically started living underground. It's like, why would you do this? Von Barry, very weird man. I don't know why he thought the things he did. But it's like, what are you suggesting here? That you're just going to be like, yeah, well, get rid of the bridges because we don't need them more. It's like, you need them when you lose power and you can't fly your shuttles. I mean, it just is... I know I'm guilty of this, that there are various things that make me dependent on electricity. Good. I mean, there's no reason for the power to go out, just it's not going out right. But I'm very cognizant of the fact that I am dependent on it. And yeah, so I need to have some fallbacks, at least for entertainment. Like, I have physical books over there. I have batteries so that I can, like, charge up the Kobo and such if need be. I mean, so, and other things as well, where it's like things besides just electricity, like having we have various natural gas appliances in the home, so we can still have like a natural gas water heater. So power's out, can still have a hot shower. That's great. Everyone that's like, oh, we should go to electric water heaters because that's so much more efficient because electricity is so much cleaner than natural gas. It's like, what do you think makes what do you think makes the electricity? But it's like, you got a power outage, you no longer have hot water. Good for you. I'm gonna have it though. And also with stoves. Because like we can boil water if we need to, because natural gas stove, you just need to light a match, works fine. Oven, not so much, because the way that is controlled, we actually can't use that. That is electronically controlled. We used to have an old oven, still they used a pilot light. So that would work when power is out, because you just need a pilot light. So it's like, yeah, we got all the furnace is also natural gas. The clothes dryer is natural gas, although true, it still needs electricity for other things. But it's like, yeah, it's natural gas is great. I've had numerous power outages in my life. Endured plenty of power outages in my life. I've never once experienced natural gas being off. Never once. That's how much more reliable it is. And it's also where I live. The majority of the electricity comes from natural gas. And it's also, I just think it's nonsense. It's like, oh, electricity is so much cleaner. It's like, what are you talking about? The electricity, in order to be generated, has natural gas being burned somewhere else. The electricity is now having to be pumped here, essentially, transmitted over the power lines. And as it's going, it's losing power to resistance. When it gets into the house, it loses power from resistance. As it's continuing to go into the device, it's losing power from resistance. Whereas the natural gas maintains all of its chemical energy until you burn it. The only energy being spent is at the pumps to maintain pressure in the lines. That's it. It's far more efficient in that, especially when you further consider that it's being burned to produce heat, to boil water, to turn turbine, versus to then create the electricity, and some of that heat, not all the energy it's releasing from being burned is necessarily going to electricity. But when we're igniting the natural gas here to heat water in the water heater, or to heat water in a pot for soup or something like that, then the heat is going directly to the thing. It's like, it really is more efficient. And it's a food comes from the grocery store kind of problem. Is how I put it. That I genuinely believe that there are people that they think that that's where food comes from. They don't understand everything that goes on behind it, everything that brings the food to the grocery store. So it's like that with electricity. They just think the electricity comes from the outlet. They don't understand all the stuff going on behind it. And once you do understand, then it's like, yeah, natural gas makes perfect sense to use for heating and cooking purposes, and water heating, still heating, but makes perfect sense to use that in your home, especially because it's a separate system. So even if you were to lose electricity, you'd still have the ability to heat your home, you'd still have the ability to cook food, and most importantly, boil water. That should be considered so significant that there should be plenty of legislatures straight up banning anyone from trying to degrade natural gas. They're saying, no. As like security and safety, we need this. Okay, that's the level that should be treated at. But we got a lot of idiots. All right. So then there's also this. This is the last thing. It's like, I mean, some of it I like, but it's also, why? Why is Vonda? Why is this in here? I do not understand. So they land, and you got the two garbage men. One of them is named Harvey. Sometimes Harvey, wondered if he should go back to teaching. The garbage man used to be a teacher? But he knew that if he did, he would get less work done on the novel than he did now. Okay. Yeah. He needed a job of physical labor. Now the book went better than before, but he still could not finish it. It's actually a little funny because it is mentioned later that he has finished it. I actually didn't even notice that before until reading that. Yeah, let me read the next highlights. I'm just skipping the small part in between. And then what happens, Ben said. Harvey was telling him a scene from the novel. Every book on writing and every creative writing teacher he knew of said that writers who talked about their stories never wrote them. For years, Harvey believed it and never told anyone anything till after he had written it down. But recently he had met a writer, an actual published writer. Everybody's different, Harvey, the writer had said. Don't ever let anybody tell you you've got to work the same way they do. Don't let them make your rules for you. They'll screw you up every time. You're supposed to be in the rule-breaking business. That I mildly the rule-breaking business. That I don't agree with. The rest of the points I agree with, though. He was drunk, so maybe it was all bull, but just as an experiment, Harvey broke that first law of writing and talked about a story. To Ben, as it happened. And then he went home and wrote it. He had not sold it yet, but at least he had finished the damned thing. He did finish it twice before, but he still could not finish it. And this is literally like here and then 3 paragraphs later. So far it had 3 reject slips. Harvey was getting attached to his reject slip collection. Sometimes I worried him. I'm glad I live in the time I do, because I don't need to care about being rejected. I can just self-publish. So it's like, finish the story, put it out there, move on to the next one. But I want to say I've heard stories from people that did eventually get published, and it was, they just, alright, fine, you reject me, move on to the next one anyway. And it would be like at their 3rd book, where now when they send it in, they actually get attention. And it could even be like the 3rd book in the series. Which seems odd, but it's like, I mean, they got the other 2, and it is sending it to somebody to consider, they may like, okay, I like this. But it's the 3rd part. Can I see the other 2? Yeah, here it is. So it's like, okay, we'll work with you to get this all together so you can put it all out there, but it still is that, even if they aren't in a series, and that I'm not so sure about, but it still is the whole, you just, okay, fine, didn't like the one, write the next one, send that, write the next one, send that. Just keep doing that. But no, everybody's different, Harvey. Don't ever let anybody tell you got to work the same way they do. Don't let them make your rules for you. They'll screw you up every time. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. I know I write differently than other people. One thing that I know mentioned previously, I just don't remember the last time. I'm rather fortunate that I typically, for me, the hard part is sitting down to write. But when I sit down to write, I can just sit down and write. It's one thing that I'm very fortunate about. And because there are some people, like somebody has a quote of, oh crap, I don't remember it well now, but like the scariest thing to an author is the great white page. Not for me. It's basically, I'll have the idea and it's like, okay, well, what are the first words for it? And I remember for one book, it was actually the first book I self-published, I couldn't think of what to do, so it's like, alright, screw it. Won't write chapter 1, let me write a prologue. Wrote the prologue, chapter 1 flowed easily. I mean, it's like, but I don't have writer's block in that way. It's just the discipline, technically, to make sure I've set aside the time I'm going to sit down and write. But I can then just sit and write. And I know that's something that I can do, other people can't. So my advice would never help them in that way, but it still is. That's not to say I shouldn't share my own experience. That's not to say they shouldn't share theirs with me. It's still something to learn from, something that may help you figure out new ways of doing it, and also understand what your own strengths and weaknesses are as well. Because like I said, I'm not always that good at making sure I have the time, because like, this stuff is taking up so much of my time. These videos, like I'm not going to be able to write any today, which is unfortunate. But it's like those people where it's like they might not be able to sit down and just write, but they may also have much better discipline or figured out a way to establish that discipline for them, that they can set aside so much time where they can sit down, even if all they're doing, grabbing keyboard, even if all they're doing is just staring at the keyboard, but they've set aside the time to be able to stare at the keyboard to eventually decide to eventually, get to that. That's still something that might be better than what I have, and so I would still be able to learn from that. There's also that I have no idea why you would ever think those who talk about the story don't write it. It's like, why would you ever think that? I mean, it's also nonsense, because it's like, is it Lewis Carroll that was Alice in Wonderland? He was just telling the story to his daughter, Alice, and like after telling it, was then writing it down. Tolkien also, although I'm not sure how much, well, I don't remember with Tolkien how much of it was he was actually writing it down versus he was telling it to his kids and then writing it down. He may have been writing it down first, but he was using them as his first test audience, which is funny to see some stories of. Is it in the front matter? for the version of the Lord of the Rings I have, or is it somewhere else? Where some of the memories that his sons had are actually where it's like, but wait, Dad, you said Bilbo's handkerchief was blue, not red, and he'd be like, it doesn't matter, and then go and check, and it's like, I have to fix that now, because they were actually catching him on those details. So it's like, I mean, it's definitely talking about it with somebody is definitely part of some people's process. I don't have something to talk about my stories with, but if I did, yeah, I would. And it would also be about like what I'm currently writing on and what I want to write next, and it wouldn't stop me from writing the thing. It's if anything, it would be helping me to test the ideas, to work them through, to then see what it is I will end up using. Because I mean, oh, here, let me use. I got one story. How long is this? I've got 376 lines in it. Now, some of those are blank to separate out individual ideas, but still, I mean, it's that many, and 71,356 characters in it, because I'm just looking at it's a text editor. I mean, it's like that's quite a bit there. That's for a story I'm going to get to, and all that is stuff that I have worked through on my own, and it's like, yeah, talking it over with somebody could actually be very helpful to, again, as I'm writing out those notes, I'm thinking it through and making changes. If I were talking to somebody, I'd be working it through and figuring things out and tweaking it. So yeah, I don't know why anyone would ever have that advice, have as a rule of writing. It's like, no, everybody has their own style, their own behaviors, their own habits, their own writing hygiene. You could even say, just do whatever it is that makes sense for you. But I would also say this. And it goes back to something that I once heard on the radio many years ago now. We had there was a baseball player that his father was also in baseball. I don't remember if his father was a player or a coach, something like that. But when teaching his son how to play, one thing that he did, because he knows in baseball, you know, when they come up to bat, they have these rituals that they go through, where it's like, touching the bill, not the signals, but it's like, they have to touch the bill of the hat. They have to do stuff like that. They'll have these complex rituals. What his father had realized, and was going to make sure he taught his son properly, was those rituals. The more complex they were, anytime those players would then get stuck in a rut, they would have a much harder time getting out of it. But those who had simpler rituals, it was much easier to get out of those. So he made sure his son had a very simple ritual. And what was it? Take the bat and just tap himself twice on the shoulder with it. That was it. That was all there was to the ritual. And it is legitimately ritual. You do that and just is like, okay, I need to bat now. Think. I'm in the zone now to do it. And he, would get, that's what they were talking about on the radio. He would get out of any slumps much faster because he could get right back into the mindset so much faster. It's like that I would encourage. So that if you do have some sort of writing ritual, or find that you want to do that you want to establish one, make sure it is simple. Like for me, I listen to music. But I select what the music is for any book, because to help maintain a certain emotional consistency. And I have had experiences where I've tried, even when editing, listening to different music, because like I feel like listening to something, and it's like I lock up, I can't do it, and then it's like, okay, gotta go back. But yeah, it's like just fine with this. I would recommend, if you can, keep it simple, so that way it's easy to slip into it, to get in there, and don't make it something. But if it is what you want to do, it's like, don't make it where you have to be in the right chair. Don't make it where you have to have like on your favorite shirt, that you have to have the lighting just right. Sorry, I want it. Hang on. There we go. Yeah, I mean, don't make it that complex. So yeah, that would be the advice I would give. Certainly nothing so specific as don't talk to me. Why would you do that? I'm saying it's so unnecessary to have this garbage man trying to be a novelist. Why do we need this background here? Vonda, why? I mean, I kind of wonder if this was something from her own history where she'd run into people that was saying that and was just like, you're morons. I want to put in the book that you're morons because you're morons and I want the world to know you're morons. It's like, if that's the case, good. But, oh boy. All right. You know what? Hey, I want to keep. I mean, there can't be much. Oh, that's right. No, there is one more note I do need to mention. At this point, there's no like side plot. There's no other location we could be at. So yeah. But no, there is one thing that occurred to me. Search for Spock talked so much about standard, which is true. Is also a problem because of Wrath of Khan. Why would Khan be able to speak with everyone else? He wouldn't necessarily know standard. Like, what language is he speaking? But in Search for Spock, no. Federation, they speak standard. And Chekhov knows Russian and standard, and he'll slip back into Russian when he gets flustered. That was established, actually, in Wrath of Khan. So yeah, it's like, why does Khan know standard? And all of his men know standard? Unless we ought to assume it is English. But then why call it just standard? The reason why I'm bringing it up is because there's no mention of the fact that Spock, his native tongue is Vulcan. He also knows standard. Would he know English, which is what would be spoken in San Francisco at this time, predominantly English? Chekhov is Russian and standard. Would he know English? There's no reason he would know English unless standard is English. So it is actually kind of a significant problem that they shouldn't necessarily be able to communicate with people unless it is they bring a universal translator with them. But are we to believe that's the case? I mean, it's just... It's one of those detail things because it is reasonable that standard would be English, because English is already like the world's dominant language because, well, Britain kind of brought it everywhere and we're a superpower for a long time while bringing it everywhere, and then we became the superpower, and it's kind of a, hey, you want to do business in the world, you're probably going to want to do some of that with America. It helps if you speak English because that's our dominant language here. So it is dominant, so it would make sense. We need one language to be the common thing on Earth. What's it going to be? Well, probably English, because you already have the largest number of people that would be capable of speaking it, because it already spans across many, many borders. So yeah, it would make sense to just go with that. And then with the Federation, well, technically standard should be composed of many languages, should be taking elements from many languages. So would that be English? I don't know anymore. So but yeah, that is a detail that it is important. But I will admit, the only reason I really thought of it is because it was so important in Search for Spock. The cultural importance of the Klingon language and having multiple dialects was so important there. This is the next book, and I didn't have 2 years in between reading them. It wasn't even a day, technically, if you want to count the fact that I finished editing the review where I talk a lot about that, and then went immediately to reading this. So, yeah. Yeah, I went straight into it, so it's like, Vonda, you should have brought it up. Yeah. I mean, even just something like, Captain, like Uhura bringing up Captain. Will they understand us? Will they know standard? And have Kirk say something like, or maybe they ask her because Uhura may know the answer because of her background, her training in communications, might be like, standard is largely based on English, which will be the predominant language we will encounter here. Just try to constrain it to like what you learned in these books on how to speak standard or something like that. It's like you need to do that, and then that'll be fine. You can just try to limit yourself to that. It'll be fine. Like limit it to standard 3. If you get into standard 4, that's when you start getting like Vulcan and Beta Z words. And don't do that. Try to stay at just what you learned in standard 3 in high school. It's like something like that would have addressed it. And as far as the whole how can you read it? I got nothing on that one. I mean, what, what are the characters? What is the alphabet for standard? Yeah. Anyway, it. I did say this chapter. I'm getting, a lot of my criticisms are getting technical. But it is. I am concerned because one errant chapter that bores me is fine. Or that I have a lot of issues with is fine. Doesn't necessarily break my rule that I have talked about previously, that you can have something start off good and then fall to being bad. It doesn't matter if it comes back up to good. Because of that fall, you lose interest, and people will just stop because, this isn't so good anymore. So it doesn't matter if it comes up to be great. It still is. You can't have the fall there. But if it's just, like one thing goes back up, that's fine. I am legitimately concerned that we are actually in a fall that it won't recover from. Well, that it's like it doesn't matter if it recovers from is what I mean by my first point. It doesn't matter. Or is it that the story is actually not going to be that good? That does concern me. Because both Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, I think I would Wrath of Khan I do consider the novelization better than the movie. Search for Spock, I actually haven't rewatched the movie, but in some ways I'd say it's a little tied. And mainly that's because like the issues I have with the novelization, like the whole Sulu Excelsior stuff, that's so poorly to badly done. That's not in the movie. And so it's like, okay, something that I really have take a lot of issue with isn't in the movie. So it's like that does help the movie there. But it's like it is good. And so I'd say they're about even, because there's spots where the novelization is a lot better than Search for Spock. There's spots where it's a lot worse, so it's kind of even. The Voyage Home, I would have hoped. I hope that it ends up me loving it at least as much as the movie, but I do not know. I am legitimately concerned that I might not enjoy it, that I might not find this as good. So yeah, we'll see. We shall see what happens. There's plenty more chapters left. But yeah, I don't know if this is a long aberration, or a actual trajectory issue. We'll find out. See you next time.